thank you all. So welcome to my talk on how to make Auth great again. So first of all, quick introduction about me. I'm Deniz, father of two wonderful dogs that I hope that they won't kill my demo today. Besides that, I'm an automation and simplicity lover with a background in development, offensive security, and DevSecOps. Currently working at White System as a cloud security specialist role. So let's get started. So there are typical mistakes on old ways of doing authentication. This call will be really focused on authentication. So one of the mistakes is that it's often too complicated, not easily pluggable or documented. And then there is the mistake, in my opinion, to rewrite your own custom authentication service, which often results into bad designs or wrong specifications. Then, oftentimes it's never the same. So everyone implements it its own way. You can see companies using that technology that way, or other companies using other ways. So it's not always the same way. Then implementation-wise, it's challenging to make something that's fast, reliable, and robust at the same time. And that is tested via the CI pipelines with security scans or code quality scans, and robust at all. So that comes to the second topic of vulnerabilities. So having something custom often opens up big security flaws. And that comes also with the maintenance, painful maintenance of updating, versioning, and deploying everything. So this is a quick schema I made for life without modern authentication. So here we can see we have our front end. We have three services. User service, book service, delivery service. And here we also have our authentication service. So this flow is once the user is already authenticated, each time, let's say he wants to get a new book, he will need to be sure that his session is valid and verified. So each time, each services will go and verify with the authentication service that everything is good. So there is multiple ways of verifying that. You can either have the same block of code for verifying authentication on each services that are copied and pasted, or you can have a library. Let's say you're using Node.js. You could, say npm install validator library, and you will have your library here, and you can version it, update it. But there are some issues with that. So the outcome, you will have a service that gets really heavy and complex. You don't necessarily want to handle authentication at your service level. There's a better way to do that, I think. Then copy-pasting code can result in more mistakes. So also different versions of the library, the authentication library we've talked about, can be used. For instance, if we go back, the user service might use the authentication library version 1, whereas the book service and the delivery service might use the version 3. So it's not really stable all the way around. Adds up latency for your calls. A new version of the authentication service will impact other services. So a major breaking change into the authentication service will require all the other services consuming it to be reworked, which is hard to maintain. And it's really risky. One mistake will result into big security issues, which is quite bad. So I don't recommend personally writing either authentication, authorization, or custom cryptographic services on your own. Use what's existing, tested, and proved by the community. And while talking about securities, so the security outcome. Most commonly you can see front-end authentications, local storage of sensible session data, privilege escalation. Let's say you have one service that shouldn't have access unauthenticated, but it is. Reset password links with user IDs inside of it, so you can modify the user ID to reset somebody else's password. And a lot of big problems can happen if you make your custom authentication way of doing things. So why is Ory for authentication different? Here I put authentication, but authorization too. However, this talk will be more on the authentication side of things. But generally, because it's an open source culture, so everything is available. The code source is here, you can contribute, and that makes it beautiful to collaborate. It helps you to bring your own UI and also your identity schema. We will talk more about the identity schema in the demo and see how that can be useful. Besides that, there is multiple available SDKs. So let's say you're using Dart or JavaScript or whatsoever, there is a supported SDK for you. Advanced configurations and validation. That is great because oftentimes when you make your authentication service, you need to add validations. So for instance, if the password is, I don't know, minimum of 8 characters of length, well, you need to code that your own. Or let's say if the password was already breached, you need to take care of those things. And besides that, I think that Ory is really security focused. You can see if you have worked a bit with it, that there's the CSRF token that is passed by for each request. There's also the course that strengthens the overall communication. So they have tested it and it's really robust. The community is always active on Slack, on GitHub discussions, and basically everywhere they're open to help. And it integrates well with API gateways. You can set Ory locally. So yeah, you might say, hey, I can use Keycloak too locally. Yeah, sure. The beauty of Ory is you can select what you want to run locally. Let's say you only need Kratos for authentication. Well, you can just use the Ory Kratos Docker image locally and run it. So you don't have your disk memory or disk capacity full. Besides that, it's maintained with love. It's not a project that will die. I think it's always maintained. There's always new merge requests, pull requests done. So yeah, these are one of the reasons I think it's important. I've also added a small link here that Ory describes more in detail the differences. So how it looks like with Ory. Here, let's go over the components quickly. We have an authentication front end. We have a traffic API gateway. We have Authkeeper, which is our proxy, and we have Kratos. So the first flow here is when you authenticate. So you just start, you have your authentication page. You talk to Kratos to either register, log in, recover, or any other flows. And once it's done, it gives you back a session token. So with that session token, when you try to access a protected resource, same services we had earlier, well, you need to go over traffic because it's traffic that is the API gateway on front. And with traffic, and you could use any other gateways as well. With traffic, you can use the forward auth middleware to talk to Authkeeper. So what happens is Authkeeper will be really your proxy that decides either if the request will need some sort of validations or not. So how it's done, it's that you have your access rules in Authkeeper where you define which resources you want to be publicly accessible, which you want to be authenticated, which also you want to be authorized. So let's say you need a resource that authenticated. Well, the access rule and Authkeeper will tell that, and it will contact the correct service. Let's say for authentication, Kratos will be validated, and for authorization, you could have Keto here that could do the call. And when this is done, regarding the condition, if it's KO, so if it's not good, you're redirected, and if it's good, you have access to your protected services. So where do I get started? So there's multiple challenges, and you can see that first step is really to find what you need. Ory offers many great projects. There is Authkeeper, Keto, Kratos, Hydra. So be sure to select the one that applies to you. Then you need to think about where do I host it? So depending on your business, you can use Ory Cloud, which is really good. You don't maintain the infrastructure relays, or you can host it internally. There's the Helm charts that are available. You could maybe have a Terraform code that calls the Helm provider to, deploy your components such as Kratos, Hydra, Oathkeeper, and so on, in a cluster or in a bare metal server, depending on your preferences. Then the last challenge, this I learned the hard way. It's really to start small. So what I mean by start small is if you don't need Auth 2 or the Hydra capabilities to do end-to-end tokens or to do authorization code grant, well, just start with Kratos and Oathkeeper. It's a good starting point. And then you can extend it and add more stuff. Cool, so enough talking, demo time. So I've made I forked this Ory example repository, and I've added the Kratos Oathkeeper traffic path. And so this demo and this repository includes a custom UI that integrates with Kratos, traffic API gateway for forwarding authentication to Oathkeeper, and as you might guess, Oathkeeper and Kratos. All right, so let's go here. This is the repository. Just drink some water. Perfect. So I'll just open it here. Let's analyze our Docker Compose file. So in the Docker Compose file, I have my traffic set up. I will maybe zoom for later. Yeah, there we go. More perfect. So I have traffic here set up as my API gateway. Then I have the Whoami service that traffic provides. I've set up Jaeger for tracing capabilities. Ory Kratos requires a Postgres database to store its data and its identities, and a mail server locally to do the reset password flows and the verification flows. So yes, what's next? I have my Kratos deployments. I was playing around to create one public and one admin, but we will use the public one. And I have my Authkeeper deployment here. And next, I have my front-end code here, which is basically a React.js application for login purposes. And that's pretty much it. Now let's see how traffic is able to, forward its authentication using the middleware. And it's basically just adding that. And if you want to use that forward auth middleware to other services, such as, let's say, our front end, that maybe you don't want a specific path in your front end to be accessible without authentication, you can just specify it here as a middleware that will be used. Okay, so let's go maybe on to the identity schema. We've talked about it quickly, but as you can see, the schema has the email property and also the password. There's also that verification with the schema I'm using that checks if the password was leaked or whatsoever. Then we also have the custom traits. So you can set custom traits such as first name, last name, or any other things you need. And Kratos will store it as your identity. It will map it to your user. And yeah, that's it for that. Now, maybe let's see the access rules. So the Whoami service we've seen that was deployed with traffic. So I've added a rule that says, hey, this thing here doesn't require authentication at all. It's available from everyone. Perfect. Now, for my front end, I have these endpoints. I'm saying that, hey, all these recovery, login, and reset password flows doesn't require authentication. All right. Now what? So we have a service here that we see that requires authentication because as a handler, we require the cookie session. And for that, we have specified the robot.txt file. So let's see how it is in the web page. All right, so I have my traffic running here. I have all my services in here. I can see the middlewares, and let's say I go to my front end, which is here. I can see that it's basically delegating the authentication for the front end. But yeah, let's go to our login page. So yeah, there's one thing here. I don't know. These are custom pictures that changes every time I load the page. So if there's a weird picture, I'm sorry in advance. But yeah, when I go to my login page, as you remember, the robots.txt required authentication. So you see, I was able to basically with my access rules to say that, hey, this thing here, if you want to access it, you need to have authentication. And let's have some fun with it. If I find my, okay, let's remove it from here and add it into the anonymously accessible access rules. So if I go back and I do a quick refresh, you can see that, hey, now you don't need authentication. So it's as easy as it is to configure your authentication with your access rules instead of having to, we've talked about it, to manage versions on each services and had all these pain points to take into considerations. So Authkeeper really helps that and integrates well with an API gateway. Yeah, what's next? So let's go back to our login page. Perfect. So let's create the user, right? So first name, Ory, it's a demo, and I hope it goes well. Ory demo. And for password, let's just write QWERTY, right? Let's just write something that doesn't make sense. So you see, there's the length validation. Let's write QWERTY 1, 2, 3, 4. You see the password has been found in a data breach. So all those verifications are handled for you, which is really cool. Now let's take a password that makes sense. So there you can see, save, and let's say login. You can see that I'm logged in, and special shout out for the picture. And we can see here I'm not verified. I can start with the verification flow. I'll just open my mail server before. All right, refresh. Okay, so I want to verify my account. I click on it. I should get my email soon. I didn't like that twice, but once I click here. So you can see that my verification link was not into the authorized paths. So that's why I got this error, but normally I should have got the verification and my button should have changed in here. It changed, so probably something I messed up in the links, but the return URL links, but yeah, I'll have to work on it. But the goal of the demo is really to understand how easy and quickly you can get up and running with those components and reduce all the pain points of authentication and ease, the microservice world if you're going through that, easing that authentication thing, delegating it to the API gateway and Authkeeper.